I thought that I could do a bit of a screen share to show some stills from the show, and kind of talk a little bit also about puberty blockers and why I think that's just a key thing for all of this. I want to start with puberty blockers. You know, they're provided to children as young as I've heard 11, 10, even 9. They're often said that it's acceptable to give them to children because they're given for precocious puberty, but they don't want to mention the fact that when they're given for precocious puberty, they're given to children who are much younger so that they go through puberty at the normal time. When they're given to children for gender reasons, the idea is to suppress puberty entirely and then to try to mimic puberty by giving them the cross-sex hormones, completely taking out a lot of intermediate hormonal steps that are not replaced at any point by gender-affirming care. And that would include luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, which have important roles in developing the nervous system. And I believe have significant roles in developing the ability to have a sexual response. And there's a lot of risks to puberty blockers. Jazz Jennings has been living through some of them. And a big risk of them is that when they are growing, they're gaining weight, they're getting taller, and their bones are expecting them to start mineralizing and for the growth plates to start to fuse. And so when you deny a child sex hormones, you are denying them the appropriate bone fusion at the appropriate time. And that it all is supposed to happen at a particular time for a particular reason. And that is that they gain weight and get to the point where those growth plates actually can start to slip. And if they slip and then they fuse, they're going to fuse wrong. And the solution for this problem is called slipped capital femoral cap or slipped femoral epiphysis, which is a misnomer. The solution for that is actually to just take a big screw and just to screw it into the femur and try to hold it in place. So it's just, you imagine that that's happening in the hip. It's happening in other joints too. Any load-bearing joint in the body is going to be subject to this kind of problem from puberty blockers. And so you see all these detransitioners talking about how they have all this joint pain, all this back pain, and they don't know why. Their bones were supposed to fuse at a particular time when they got to be a particular weight and height. And so Jazz Jennings was put on it when he was only 11, and then he was pretty much immediately diagnosed with severe mental health complications, which would be depression and anxiety at 12, which they want us to believe is totally unrelated. But how could it be unrelated? They are aware of the fact that the progesterone, especially, was causing some of the problems, so they took him off of it. They kept him on the estrogen so that he would continue to feminize. He says in the show that the estrogen is what made him start to eat. It made him have this ravenous hunger. And now, of course, he's gained over 100 pounds, especially since he had the vaginoplasty at 17. So when they say that these aren't happening to minors, it's just a complete lie. There have been very famous cases where they happen to minors, and there's a lot of cases that are on record of them happening to minors that are not famous. So that's those hormones that I mentioned earlier that are very important for neurological development. This is actually part of a larger show, or a larger talk that I gave at another talks that's on my YouTube if you want to see the full thing. This is just the part about Jazz. And so Jazz, because he was on the puberty blockers, his genitalia didn't develop because it didn't have the appropriate hormones. And therefore, when it came time to give him the vaginoplasty, they didn't have enough tissue, famously. And they talked about this at the show. And so his vaginoplasty immediately failed. And then they had to try to revise it and then revise it again. And so he was left with these large scars from skin grafts. And pretty famously also, like as I mentioned, he's gained a lot of weight. His mother talked in the show about how she has to forcibly dilate him because he just doesn't want to a lot of the time. Why would he? And her big fear was that it would close up and all of her effort would be wasted. So I use this example because when you remove medicine sees women's organs as kind of just not useful unless they're actively making a baby. But the uterus has a significant role in regulation of hormones, and regulation of hormones has a significant role in delaying the onset of dementia and maintaining your neurology. And those other hormones I mentioned earlier that are just canceled by puberty blockers and not replaced, not even attempted to be replaced because it would mature the gonads and they don't want that. Those have been implicated already in the development of Alzheimer's. And someone pointed out to me, well, it's only the high levels of these hormones that are implicated in Alzheimer's, and puberty blockers cause low levels. Well, the levels that you're exposed to as a child are coding your neurology for later in life. So if you don't have the normal levels as a child, that changes what is considered a high level for those underdeveloped structures. We are setting them up for Alzheimer's, in my opinion. It's not going to be good. Anyway, I feel strongly about it. Anyway, so this is a scene also where they confront Jazz about his dilation and the fact that he's not dilating in private, and he's doing it in their room, and he's leaving it all out. And so it's just the point of this is just to humiliate him on national television. So this was in season 7. So we're working our way up to season 8, but I want to make sure people have a good foundation. And again, you can see this talk on my YouTube. He has undergone so much trauma, and he is being forcibly dilated on a daily basis while he's had to live at home for several years during COVID. He's finally gotten away from his parents and gotten away to college. And so that brings us to season 8. And season 8, they're just kind of pushing him to start dating. Like, so first he comes back from college and he says he wants to start dating, and everyone says, no, it's too dangerous. There's transphobic hate crimes everywhere. And then he starts going on dates every episode. And one of the dates is quite disturbing because they have him go and they meet this guy. He meets this guy that he's met on the internet, their first time meeting. And he'll see models for the show, the behavior of accepting a mixed drink that was already ordered and sitting out for him and just drinking it right down. So I found that quite disturbing in the show. In another date, this is in the finale episode that is still paywalled at the moment, but he goes on a date with this other woman who really kind of forces a kiss, because they'd been leading up to that for several episodes of like, who's he going to kiss? Who's going to be his kiss? And as you can see in this shot, especially as she's like kissing him, his body freezes up, his fist is clenched, and he just kind of can't wait for it to be over. He actually, shortly after this, ends it. But this is supposed to be like the happily ever after show. And of course, in several points in this season, they also, in the finale, they have Jazz out of frame here. He's sitting on top of his brother, giving him a massage, and everybody's talking about how great he is at massages and how great of a prelude to sex massages are. And all the while, his mom is like staring at him, and it's just very disturbing. They seem to be very actively marketing him for a relationship through the show, and then more broadly marketing the idea of sex work as a way to fund transgender surgeries. They had other characters this season, including a character named Jojo, who was talking about his plan to do frisky modeling. So in other words, sex work online. And Janet, the mother, was actively approving that and saying, what a great idea that is. And Jojo was doing that in order to be able to pay for breast augmentation and for other interventions. And Jojo, like Jazz, was also, it seems, puberty suppressed and has a lot of issues, a lot of very obvious issues. There's another episode in season 8 where they go to get waxed because it wouldn't be an episode of I Am Jazz if they didn't somehow call attention to the vaginoplasty or to the fact that Jazz used to have a penis. So they go to get waxed, and he's saying, well, I'm Latina, so I'm just covered in dark hair all over my body, and they're waxing this like hairless back. It's completely hairless because of the puberty suppression. And then he goes on about how he's not as hairy as some of the cis women in his family, and it's like, well, yeah, because they have testosterone. So it's just absurd. One of the most poignant scenes in this season 2 is where Jeanette is drunk, of course, and drinking with her friend, and they're talking about how Jazz used to have a penis. or how Jazz doesn't have a penis, and therefore they wouldn't be talking about his dating life in reference to the penis when he walks in on them. He says, "What are you talking about?" And they say, well, basically, we're not talking about your penis because you don't have one. And Jazz says, "Well, I did used to have a penis." And it's just like, it really seems to be starting to click for him. This is a disturbing situation he's in. And then he because he's back home with his abusers for a few weeks, he even starts thinking, I don't want to go back to college. I want to drop out. But he does go back to college. And then the season ends with, well, in addition to showing off exactly where in Harvard he's staying, they do a pan of his room, and then they look at his view from his window and say, "This is Jazz's dorm." And then allegedly he gets a death threat. And they make a big deal about how this death threat is different because they know where he is this time, even though they show his house in every episode leading up to that. Very confusing. But then it's all a big setup for how brave Jazz is, essentially. And so the season ends with them having this sort of like church get together, and this was quite a bit calmer than some of the protests we've seen recently from trans activists, with the punching and the all of that. So they're all just out, and Danna, of course, shows up uninvited and sees that all is well because Jazz is so brave. Of course, none of them can iron, so the flags all look terrible. But it's pretty hysterical that they're actually sold as capes. This isn't an idea that they're all having. They're actively sold as capes. So yeah, that's basically season 8. It's very, very, very disturbing, and it's just very explicitly, the big themes are boundary crossing. So they have another episode where they all go to a goat pen and they do yoga inside of a goat pen next to goats that are actively defecating, like on ground that's already covered in that, and incest and Jazz's genitals and using sex work to pay for transitioning. And it's presented as so normal, but if you actually watch it, it's horrifying. It's disturbing. I don't understand why she's not in jail. I don't get it. Just real quick again, this photo shows that LH and FSH, those are the hormones that go between the brain and the testicles and the ovaries that then lead to the testosterone estrogen. So they're just cutting that whole step out like it's irrelevant and not doing anything. So they because they want to market the puberty blockers as reversible. And whereas in my opinion, it would be much kinder and you wouldn't lose much if they actually just removed the gonads. I mean, it would obviously not be good for them, but it would be less bad for them than what they're trying to do. This is broadcast national.
Why is your dilating gel in front of my TV?
Oh, I knew I left it somewhere. I dilate in here sometimes while watching TV. Dilation is a process that comes along with bottom surgery.
Okay, you can take the gel back in the room with you when you're done.
I can take the gel back.
You don't have to right now.
Here. Basically,
there's just no right answer.
You take this long acrylic object and insert it up your vaginal canal so that you maintain depth and width. It's really important that you do this because if you don't, your vagina will start closing up and it'll lose its depth and you won't be able to use it properly. Well, I love you both. Thank you for always supporting me. I'm going to continue stepping into my identity as an independent adult, and I just can't do it without either of you. So thanks for being by my side.
He's clearly furious at them.
We love you.
Love you.
We're always
All right,
gonna
have
be
a good
here.
night.
Bye. Don't forget to dilate.
I had woken Jazz out of a dead sleep and taken the dilator and put the lubrication on it and said, "Here, you take this and you put it in your vagina. If not, I will." But Jazz is bad, even when I'm home once a day.
So for now, you'll have to watch it for free. On the first 5 episodes are free on Rumble, Substack, and Odyssey right now. And then number 6 is going to be free shortly. And then I'm going to go back to some of the earlier episodes that I haven't responded to. I've really only gone in depth on season 7 and 8 and looked at some random clips from the show. And then much earlier they block everything in United States that TLC copyright claims. It looks like I can show you this one. I have a few channels on YouTube, so this is one called X Marks the Rot.
You have them? Yeah, look at them. We require mental health therapy letters, not as being transgender is a mental condition, but because it's a very difficult process to go through. It's permanent, it's going to lead, and there are going to be challenges. That's exciting, so congrats on that.
Thanks.
All right, what about the sexual stuff?
The orgasm,
Yeah,
the big O.
Did you get anywhere?
Here we are again. The big O question, and it doesn't get any easier to discuss it. I still feel uncomfortable.
Well, there hasn't been much change. My libido's still basically nowhere.
We know that when people are able to orgasm pre-surgery, they're very highly likely to be able to orgasm afterwards. Jazz does not know what an orgasm is. It's very important when you see, and although it is not something that's going to delay surgery, it's not going to be any easier for her to orgasm.
This clip is on X Marks the Rot, and I put it in one of the videos too. I wasn't able to screen capture it, so I just recorded it with my camera. That's why it's pretty low quality. Apologies for that. But so essentially in this scene, they're with Dr. Marcy Bowers, and they're talking about whether he's had an orgasm. And Marcy Bowers, who's the one who did his surgery initially, and then he also participated in number 3. He is saying, well, they usually if you can have an orgasm before surgery, you can have it after surgery, but Jazz has never had an orgasm yet. Marcy Bowers has separately also said that none of the puberty suppressed kids have orgasms. And so in my opinion, it's almost certainly true that these other hormones that are being deleted and not replaced have a significant role in maturing the nervous system so that orgasms are possible. I don't think it's just a matter of having the equipment. You know, that's obviously not maturing, but it's not just that. Otherwise, they would be able to fix it later. And they can't fix it. And so they, in season 8, they also had a long digression about whether he was asexual. And a big discussion about whether he liked kissing or not. And there's some active coaching from Jeanette in season 8 where he says, I don't really like kissing. And she says, no, yes, you do. Yes, you do. It just needs to be really important to you. And so there was another scene where they were talking about being asexual. And she's like, you're not asexual, right? And then he goes on, well, no, I'm just demisexual. I really need to. So it's clearly very important for the producers for them to act like he's overcome problems that were related to the medical interventions. And that's why we have all these 4 states and the need for him to have kissed somebody by the end of the season.